The second part of chapter 6, we're going to talk about more specifically cooperation and how cooperation and competition can be blended together to create the optimal situation based on whatever circumstances you're dealing with as a coach or as a healthcare professional. They're not necessarily polar opposites. We've talked a little bit about some of the similarities here. um, how they should be taught and how they should be blended really depends on what it is that we're attempting to accomplish. A lot of this could be based on age or sport, based on intended outcomes, based on the skill you're trying to teach or develop. And so we want to not look at these as hey, now we're going to do a competitive drill, and hey, now we're going to do a cooperative drill. We can blend both elements. We're going to see that in some of the examples coming up here. Um, Both competition and cooperation typically involved a sense of mission. Cooperation, obviously, being more group based, whereas competition tends to be more individually based. Um, in order to compete, you have to have a strong work ethic. In order to cooperate, same thing. You're using resources. You have a certain amount of preparation that needs to be done. You have to work together to address a challenge and change certain activities. And then teamwork typically is required in any team-based sport in order to compete. Cooperation obviously needs more than one person. So these are some of the examples of cooperative games, or activities that are potentially blends. Now, they're going to have a certain amount of competitiveness, and they're going to have a certain amount of cooperation in each of them. So you can have truly competitive means with competitive ends type activities, and these would be, 100-yard dash. There's one winner. And everybody else finishes in a certain place. You can have, king of the mountain or whatever, where there's only one person up there at the same time, everybody against everybody, and there's only one winner. That's a competitive means, competitive ends. Some of your drills in your sports may have something, an element to it like that. Um, I think about in basketball, a game like knockout, where if you're familiar with that, some people call it lightning, whatever you want to call it, where you're essentially knocking other people out, and then you have one winner at the end. So that's an example. Moving into more cooperative type activities, these are your sports. So cooperative means to competitive ends is sports. So soccer, basketball, every sport you can imagine. There's a certain amount of cooperation that has to take place. You can't say, hey, let's just all show up this weekend and play. Um, that's not going to go well if you haven't learned how to play together and practice together and do some of those other things. Now, the ultimate goal is to win and beat the other team, but without cooperation, that can't happen. So you can see where we shift a little bit from the competitive means, competitive ends, to the cooperative means to competitive ends. As we continue going on, we see an individual mean with an individual end. This is moving out of the team sport into the individual sports. So other things like that. Cooperative means with an individual end, um, is more kind of the drills that are meant to have people work together to help one person. And so maybe a teammate is struggling with a particular task. We bring together everybody that plays that same position and create a drill that's helping that one person achieve that goal. Cooperative means to cooperative ends. It could be a game where instead of playing a game of volleyball where one team competes against each other, you have six people on each side of the net, and the overall goal is for the group to see how long they can keep the ball from hitting the ground. And maybe they time that out, and then they see how long they can do it the next time they try. And so you see some of the blending that goes on. One of the things that we can do is create some cooperative games that de-emphasize the competition and emphasize the need for the cooperation. And so these tend to emphasize the cooperative means to the cooperative ends, which is the last example we talked about on the previous slide. And so some kids are going to need to be taught how to cooperate with each other. You're going to get kids that are going to come in that have maybe played individual sports only, don't know how to play in a team environment. How do you teach that child how to give up their own individual goals and their own desires to be part of the group. And so the cooperation may need to be taught, and it could be done through some of these games. And they could be devised just as general games themselves, or we could take traditional games and change the rules, like the volleyball example I just gave you on the previous slide. There is a game under the YouTube video that you'll see. I've used this one with some of my groups. It's a good way to lighten the mood. It's a good way to get them working together. It's a good way to have some fun, but potentially teach some cooperative um, concepts, especially if they say, okay, now let's go back and start again, and let's see if we can beat our time. Some cooperation and competitiveness can be ingrained in both of those. To create these cooperative games and for them to be effective, we want to have everybody involved as much as possible. We don't want, if we've got a team of 50 players, we don't want 5 people doing the drill. We want everybody be involved as much as possible. We want this to be a good use of time. So ideally, still learning skills, still improving in the sport in some way. Aside from um, a cooperative means to competitive ends, we wouldn't really keep score unless it's something where it's like, hey, let's come back next week and do the same drill and see if we can beat our old time. Maybe there's some of that. We want to provide as many opportunities for success as possible. We want to be providing feedback, um, providing people with opportunities to get involved in different ways. Sometimes it's best if that changes around, and so everybody can feel like they're involved. In terms of unstructured play, sometimes this can be really helpful, especially for younger groups. Um, Getting kids in games that are a little bit less structured. Maybe it's something like a dodgeball or something like that, where it's fun, um, interactive. Maybe there's a little bit of skill development involved. There's movement, there's action. Um, and there's a little bit of effort required, but the clear lesson here is just to have fun and to work together, get to know each other, and so forth. And so unstructured play can be a really good way to get kids involved and not have to worry about all the rules involved with the typical sport. In terms of how we balance this, um, ideally we blend competition cooperation all the time. Anytime we're teaching and coaching physical skills, getting everybody involved, having that little bit of competitive edge involved. And again, and the older the athletes are, the more capable they are going to be of dealing with this. Trying to meet individual needs. um, Again, incorporating both elements. um, Trying to incorporate some of the superordinate goals. That's a term that the book used. This is typically a goal that requires the cooperation of 2 or more people. And so maybe, a group of 3 or 4 has their own individual goals, and they compete against other groups of 3 or 4. So you can see where this is going. Um, some other guidelines: providing feedback consistently, encouraging kids, being positive, stressing cooperation, um, providing opportunities to learn the sport. So again, we don't want to waste time here, and we don't want this to turn into just to playtime during practice. So finding ways that this can still be focused on skill development while providing opportunities to cooperate. Okay, so that's the end of really this chapter and the overall team portion of the course. If you have any questions or concerns about any of the concepts we talked about, refer to your book, refer to um, the PowerPoint, and then let me know if you have any questions.